The wolf hit the rogue's flank before he finished his snarl. One clean strike, no warning, no hesitation. The rogue tumbled through the snow and scrambled upright with blood matting his gray fur, spinning to find his attacker. But Mara was already gone, circling, silent, invisible against the dark tree line like she had been born out of the forest itself. The rogue snarled again. Bigger mistake. She came from above this time, off a frost-covered boulder he hadn't noticed, and drove him into the frozen ground with a force that cracked the ice beneath them both. Her jaws found his scruff. She held him there, long enough for him to understand, then released. He ran. He did not look back. Mara shifted back to human form in the clearing, breathing steady, rolling her shoulder where the impact had landed. She was 24 years old. She had been doing this alone for 5 years. The cold didn't bother her anymore. Neither did the blood. She retrieved her father's hunting knife from the bark of a pine tree where she'd left it before the shift, and turned back toward the cabin without another thought about the rogue. He would not return. They never did. The cabin sat at the edge of everything, the last structure before the wilderness swallowed the world whole. She had built it herself in the first brutal winter of her exile, hands bleeding, fingers numb, driven by something uglier and more useful than hope. Spite. She had built it out of pure spite, because Dorian Voss had left her here expecting a grave, and she had decided, somewhere around the third night of freezing darkness, that she would not give him the satisfaction. Dorian Voss, alpha of the Thornvale pack. The man who had stood before her after her father's funeral looked her in the eye and told the pack she carried a curse, that the misfortunes shadowing Thornvale were her fault, that she was poison. It was a lie. She had known it then. She knew it now with the cold certainty of someone who had spent 5 years with nothing but silence and her own thoughts for company. He had wanted Ironmoor, her family's ancestral highland estate, rich with glacewort meadows and clean mountain springs. Her father's death had left it to her, and her bloodline was the only legal obstacle between Dorian and everything he wanted. So he removed her. He filed papers with the High Council 3 months after her banishment, declared her dead, absorbed Ironmoor into Thornvale's territory without a single dissenting vote from a council he had spent 2 years quietly purchasing. And the world moved on, the way the world always moves on, and forgot that Mara of Ironmoor had ever existed. She hung her father's knife on the wall above the fire and started skinning the rabbit she'd caught that morning. Outside, the wind picked up and threw snow against the wooden shutters. Normal. This was a normal night. Then the forest went silent. Not the soft quiet of snowfall. Not the gradual stillness of animals settling for the night. This was instantaneous and total. Every bird, every creature, every sound swallowed at once, as if the wilderness itself had been told to hold its breath. Mara set the knife down slowly. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, low and alert. She counted. 1 breath, 2. Then she smelled them. Wolves, multiple, heavy with discipline and rank, positioned in a wide formation around her cabin. She moved to the shuttered window and looked through the gap. 10 wolves, massive, each one the size of a draft horse, sitting motionless in the snow with golden eyes fixed on her door. They were not rogues. Rogues were chaos and hunger. These moved with the stillness of soldiers who had been given very specific instructions and intended to follow them. She could not fight 10 of those. She could not outrun them in open snow. Most people in her position would barricade the door and pray. Mara pulled on her boots, picked up her knife, and walked outside. They didn't move. The 10 wolves tracked her with their eyes, but held their positions, and she understood in that moment that she had not been surrounded for a kill. She had been surrounded to ensure she listened. Then she saw him. He stood at the tree line, human form, arms loose at his sides. A man built like war had made him, and then kept making him, with ice blue eyes that caught the moonlight and held it. She knew the face. Everyone knew the face. Kalen Voss, no relation to Dorian, High King of the Ashenwold territories. The man who had ended 30 years of interpack bloodshed through a combination of military genius and the kind of personal force that made other alphas step aside without fully understanding why they had done it. He was looking at her, the way people looked at things that surprised them. "You going to call them off?" Mara said. "Or are we doing this with an audience?" One corner of his mouth moved. He raised a hand, and the 10 wolves stepped back, creating a corridor of space between them. "Mara of Ironmoor," he said. She hadn't heard those words in 5 years. Her own name, her real name, the one that carried her father and his father before him, and 3 generations of blood and history in the Highland Meadows, spoken aloud by a king in the snow outside her exile cabin, like it had never stopped being true. Something cracked open in her chest that she did not have a name for. She kept her face still. "I haven't been Mara of Ironmoor for a long time," she said. "That," Kalen replied, "is what I came to discuss." He stepped forward, and his voice dropped the way voices drop when what they are carrying is too heavy for performance. "Dorian Voss told the High Council you were dead. He filed documents. He took your lands." He paused. "He lied, and 3 weeks ago his lie came apart." Mara did not move. "How?" "A glacewort shipment arrived at the Royal Apothecary," Kalen said. "Routine delivery, supposedly from Thornvale's new Highland operations. But the apothecary noticed something. The bundles were tied with twine dyed in mountainberry ink, a technique specific to Ironmoor's traditional harvest method. And caught in the binding was a strand of dark hair. He looked at her directly. "Your hair, Mara. Your technique. Someone with Ironmoor blood was still working those meadows." "I go back sometimes," she said quietly, "in the dark, to harvest what I need." "I know, and that habit just dismantled 5 years of Dorian's carefully constructed lie." He exhaled slowly. "But there is something else, something worse." She waited. "Dorian didn't just steal your land," Kalen said, and his voice changed, something harder underneath it now, something that sounded like contained fury held on a very short leash. "For the past 2 years, he has been poisoning the water supplies of 3 neighboring territories, agricultural chemicals, slow-acting, designed to mimic a natural blight." He paused to let that land. "Livestock dying, wolves losing their shifts, children falling sick and no one understanding why. And then Dorian arrives with glacewort, harvested from your stolen meadows, as the only effective treatment, selling it at prices that have bankrupted entire families." The silence between them was enormous. "He manufactured the sickness," Mara said slowly. "Yes. And sold the cure. Yes. Using my land." Her voice was very quiet now. The quieter she got, the more dangerous she became, and something in Kalen's expression told her he already understood that. "He used my inheritance to poison children." "Yes." Something moved through her then. Not rage, not exactly. Something deeper and older than rage. Something that started in her chest and rolled outward through every nerve until her hands were completely still, and her mind was the clearest it had ever been. When she looked down, her eyes had cast a faint gold light across the snow at her feet. Her wolf had stopped pacing beneath her skin. It had gone very, very still, focused. Kalen reached behind him and placed something on the snow-covered fence post beside him. Her father's ceremonial broadsword, the one that had hung above the Ironmoor hearth for 40 years. The one she had assumed Dorian had melted down or sold. "I found it in his trophy room," Kaelin said, and the contempt in those words was quiet and absolute. She crossed to it and picked it up. The weight was exactly as she remembered. Her hand knew it before her mind did. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to come to Greyvale, stand before the High Council as living proof that Dorian's documents are fraudulent, reclaim Ironmoor by blood right." He held her gaze. "But the Council is compromised. Half of them are in Dorian's pocket. A legal challenge alone could take years, and he has too many hands on too many levers." He paused. "So, I am also asking you to stand beside me as my chosen mate and future queen. A royal decree cannot be argued, delayed, or purchased. It ends this immediately." Mara looked at him for a long moment. "You need a living heir to a noble bloodline to legitimize the move politically." "Yes. And I need your protection to survive long enough to see Dorian answer for what he did." "Yes. That's a cold arrangement." "It is," he agreed. "But I have watched you for the last 10 minutes refuse to flinch at anything. I have read 5 years of survival reports from this territory that my scouts could barely believe. And you just walked out of that cabin toward 10 of my best soldiers with a hunting knife and not a single tremor in your hands." Something shifted in his expression. "I have met every aristocratic alpha on this continent. Not one of them is what you are." She held the sword. She thought about the children. She thought about the poisoned water and the families who had lost everything buying a cure from the man who had made them sick. She thought about her father's hands tying those same glasswort bundles 40 years ago, the right way, to heal people, not to extort them. "When do we leave?" she said. They rode for 3 days. On the 3rd night around the campfire, Kaelin spread the investigative documents between them. Ledgers, soil samples, photographs compiled by a human agency operating entirely outside pack politics, unbribable and precise. The evidence was irrefutable. What it had lacked was her, a living bloodline witness who could stand in that hall and breathe. On the 4th morning, they rode through the gates of Greyvale. The grand hall was packed. Dorian stood at the far end, dressed for a commendation ceremony, expecting a medal, wearing the particular expression of a man who believed he had covered every angle. Then the doors opened. Kaelin entered, and the room went silent, the way rooms go silent when something inevitable walks in. Then Mara walked in behind him. Dorian's face moved through 5 expressions in 3 seconds before he locked it down. "She's dead," he said loudly, appealing to the room. "This is fabricated. Whatever she has told you, whatever documents—" "Speak again," Kaelin said quietly, "before the evidence has been presented, and I will consider it a confession." Dorian went silent. The council elders who had taken his gold shifted in their seats and said nothing. The evidence was presented. Every ledger, every soil sample, every photograph. The hall grew heavier with each piece, the kind of heavy that settles on people when they realize the scale of what they permitted by looking away. Dorian had one move left. "Iron and blood," he said. "I invoke trial by combat, my claim against hers. No guards, no council, wolves only." Kaelin turned to Mara. She was already stepping forward. Dorian's wolf was enormous, pale gold, built for dominance, the kind of wolf designed to end things quickly through sheer mass. He shifted and shook the ground when he landed, and the crowd pulled back from the combat ring instinctively. Mara shifted, black as a starless night, half his size, completely still. He charged. She wasn't there. She appeared at his flank and opened a wound above his rear leg, not deep enough to kill, deep enough to matter, and was gone again before he completed the turn. He charged again. She went low, beneath his reach, and came up on the other side with another strike, this one across his shoulder. He was bleeding from 4 places before he landed a single blow. The crowd had stopped breathing. On his 5th charge, she let him come, sidestepped at the last moment with a precision that looked almost lazy, caught his momentum, and drove him into the stone floor of the hall with everything she had. He hit hard. He tried to rise. She was already on him, jaws locked around his throat, one foreleg pinning his neck, her full weight settled with absolute finality. The hall was silent. She held him there for 10 seconds. Let him feel it completely. Then she released him and shifted back to human form, standing over him while he lay bleeding and gasping on the floor of the hall he had decorated with her father's sword. "You don't get a wolf's death," she said. "You don't get a warrior's funeral or a pack to mourn you. You poisoned children, Dorian. You will be stripped of your shift and handed to human authorities to face charges in a human courtroom, in a human cage, surrounded by people who have never heard of pack law and do not care." She let that settle. "You will grow old in that cage, and when you die in it, nobody in these forests will speak your name." The council submitted before Kaelin said a word. Ironmoor was restored by royal decree before the hall had fully exhaled. Kaelin stood beside her and spoke her name to the room. Mara of Ironmoor, his equal, his chosen. And it did not sound like politics. It sounded like something that had always been true and had simply been waiting for the right moment to be said aloud. Later, when the hall had emptied and the torches had burned low, Mara stood alone, holding her father's sword. She turned it over in her hands slowly, feeling the familiar weight of it, the memory of it. 5 years ago, she had walked out of this world with nothing but a hunting knife and the cold. She did not feel triumphant. She felt settled. Like a door that had been forced open for years had finally, quietly, clicked shut. Like she was standing in exactly the place the story had always been moving toward, even in the years when she could not see it. She was home. If this story kept you hooked until the very end, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find stories like this one. Drop in the comments. Would you have spared Dorian, or would you have made a different choice? And if you want more stories about women who refuse to stay buried, subscribe. There is a lot more where this came from.